Welcome to day 3 on our journey down the road to the NBA trade deadline, a video series where I'm taking a look at a different trade every day leading up in the 2-week span up to the trade deadline. This is day 3, as I said. Day 1, I covered Zach LaVine to the Orlando Magic. Day 2 was more of a conceptual question on what the Rockets are doing and which direction they're going to go in. And day 3 is going to be a little bit more of a team you've heard in a lot of trade conversations for a lot of reasons. But before I get to any of that, be sure to like this video if you enjoy it. Let me know if this trade's crazy. And be sure to pop over to my channel, subscribe, ring that notification bell so when tomorrow's video comes out, you'll know. Now on to today's team, and who is it going to be? Well, it's another team in a precarious situation, kind of like the Rockets. And it's also just one down from the Rockets, the Golden State Warriors. They've been in a lot of conversations, and they have some pretty big contracts, so they could go out and get someone pretty notable. But we also have to think, while there have been some changes, obviously, the Warriors in the past haven't made massive changes within a year typically to be competitive that year. Like, they usually set themselves up in the future for the next year after that. However, that was before Steph Curry was kind of at the end of his career, right? I don't know if he signs another contract after this one. Like, he'll be in LeBron territory at that point. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but I think the Warriors are going to want these last 3 years of Curry to matter. So that might change the calculus on some of this. Now, with these bigger contracts, you kind of have to look to teams that are on fire just because of how much you're paying some of these guys. And, well, there's not a lot of teams more on fire right now than the Nets, even though they're like right at the edge of the play-in. Now, what are you doing here, right? You have Klay Thompson, who has not been nearly as good, and his also been affected by that. Like, obviously, you know, he's not horrible and he's been really good in the past, but the expectation of Warriors fans can wear on somebody if they're underperforming. Chris Paul has been really good in the minutes he's played, especially alongside Steph Curry and keeping the second unit pretty viable, but he is also 38 years old. Andrew Wiggins is kind of in the same situation Klay Thompson's in. He's been good and he's shown flashes this year, but he's not what we expected him to be. Draymond Green, when he's on the court's good, but he seemingly can't stop assaulting people. So where does that leave us? Well, the Warriors have pretty much come out and said everyone but Steph Curry is available to have discussions about. But we've also heard in reporting that those discussions centering around Jonathan Kuminga have not really gone anywhere. And so unless they're getting something good back, I don't think Jonathan Kuminga is part of that deal. Now, in terms of picks, the Warriors do have their first round in 2025. Second, they pretty much have their gamut of picks. They're missing a couple here and there, but they're not horribly understocked. But, you also have to think that if they're going to maybe set themselves up for this Curry era, but not try to end it with Curry, that some of those picks post-Curry might be important. Then you have the Nets, who a lot of their upcoming picks are not their own, right? 2025 first-rounder via Phoenix. Phoenix probably, unless something crazy happens, is going to be good, so that's not going to be a high pick. Second rounder, same deal. Miami's probably still going to be competent. So that might actually convey. They're a second rounder in 2026, so no first rounder in 26. 27, they've got a couple, but once again, Phoenix. Houston has a right to swap in the first round there. So, this is really like 3 years before they get to any kind of big draft compensation. Or draft capability. So you're in a spot where you kind of need to rebuild, right? You have a couple of good stars. You have Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson's been good, Nick Claxton's been good, Cam Thomas has shown a lot this year. But you also have the Ben Simmons contract. You have a lot of expiring guys: Spencer Dinwiddie, Royce O'Neal, Harry Giles III, Dennis Smith Jr., Lonnie Walker IV, Trenton Watford. So you're in this weird space of we're not really in a rebuild situation, but we kind of might want to look at maybe fine-tuning something or maybe like a soft reboot. And we don't really have a lot of the draft compensation that we would need to make bigger trades. And I think the Warriors kind of fit this because, well, draft compensation for them is nice. They're probably wanting someone a little bit more seasoned to make this matter. So here is kind of my idea, and stay with me because I know this is going to end up sounding really crazy. You send him Klay Thompson. Yes, that's a lot of money, but he is an expiring deal to kind of go along with the rest of some of these guys. He's a lot, but like I said, I think you can take the short-term pain for this because we're sending Ben Simmons back. So you're ending up eating about $5 million there, $6 million. Not great, but once again, off the books, and you're off Ben Simmons' contract. As much as they may want to keep Ben Simmons and see him as the future, with his history and it being as prevalent as it has been in terms of his injuries, I think he's a liability to most teams at this point. Now, if he comes back and is good toward, like, in that final year of his contract, then maybe the Warriors kind of have a new start for their future. But at this point, you getting them off of the Ben Simmons contract and off of that money next year, I think is a big plus for them. Like, this equals out what you would probably need in draft compensation, in my opinion. Now, you have some win now stars. You have Mikal Bridges. You have Cam Johnson. You have Cam Thomas. If you want to go Nick Claxton, sure. Even Dorian Finney-Smith. Like, he's a good player that you can put on your team that kind of just plugs in. However, you can't just trade teams, right? Your whole team is not going over. So I think if you really look at the lineup, you're going to have Mikal Bridges, yes. Cam Johnson, yes. You get some size here because you're losing Andrew Wiggins and you're losing Draymond Green. As much as Draymond Green is a liability with fighting people on the court, he is still really good defensively. He's got good vision. He can process the game pretty quickly. And he can be your playmaker. So, if Spencer Dinwiddie leaves and you have maybe less of a playmaking point guard, Draymond can kind of pick up some of that slack. And he's a big guy. Wiggins is still relatively, he's kind of coming out of his prime, but he could still be good. And maybe a change of scenery helps with that. Worst case, these are two big contracts that if a disgruntled star comes out in free agency, you get off that. But if they don't come out in free agency is what I meant to say, you can make a trade, right? Because this would be kind of your Trae Young money, right? If, just as an example. So you have two players you can use. One player that you can use in the short term that maybe, like, if they bring him back, obviously it's not on that much money, right? Unless he just goes crazy, but I doubt that's the case. And your money's pretty close at this point. Now, if you did want to go say, hey, can we get a Cam Johnson or Cam Thomas as well, or Nick Claxton, you could probably do that. Whether you're giving up Kevon Looney, or if you did decide to jump off the Jonathan Kuminga train, you could kind of make either of those work. But I think, like I said, you can't trade full teams, basically. So Nick Claxton, he's expiring. Maybe they keep him, maybe they don't. We don't really know how that's going to go. Cam Thomas is going to be around for a while. And I think if you were looking at this team, this is probably the guy you want to keep, right? He's young enough that you're building around this guy in the future, even without draft capital. And, if you lose Nick Claxton, it's not the end of the world. You have other centers, maybe aren't as good in certain degrees, but I think this gets them to the point where at the end of the year, you see some promise here. Maybe Ben Simmons comes back next year, and you have a viable starting five, right? If Ben Simmons comes back, him and Steph, Then you get Mikal, Cam Johnson, and Kevon Looney. Or, if you decide to change up Jonathan Kuminga somewhere in there, sure, great. If you decide, if Ben Simmons is injured, you still have Chris Paul, and this pairing has been pretty good. So you have some stuff going on that you're going to need to get used to each other as a team, but you have the second half of the season basically to do that. Come in next season, maybe Ben Simmons is healthy, and if he is, and he can make it the whole season, him, Steph, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and whoever you have at center, that's dangerous, right? So if you have to throw some picks, because I think this is solid in as much as the Nets probably don't want to give up like their biggest name star. They might be okay if you're giving them something to set them up in the near future. But let me know in the comments down below, am I nuts for this? Because this is wild, and I know probably both Warriors fans and Nets fans are going to just roast me for this. But realistically, if you want to make the last years of Steph Curry's contract, like I said, we're not sure if he resigns after that. If you want those years to mean anything, you're probably in the win now mode as opposed to trying to set yourself up next year. Anyway, like I said, let me know. I'll see you tomorrow.